Hello and welcome to Adabas Auditing for ZOS, keeping a watchful eye on your valuable database data. My name is Eric Wood and I'm a Principal Systems Engineer with Software AG Government Solutions, and let's take a deeper dive look into database auditing. If you watched my previous video, I talked a lot about how a lot of enterprises and organizations have been storing sensitive data in database for decades. So in this presentation, I'm going to talk more about the who, when, where, what, and how this data is being captured for audit purposes to meet some of the challenges that most organizations are facing today with the increasing demand for auditing and securing the data in their applications. So with our solution, the Adabas Auditing for ZOS allows you to see who's been accessing the data, when they access the data, where they access the data from based on the terminal, the host, the IP address, and what they actually did with the data. So we can look at the whole operation and the functions that they perform against that database data, as well as if there were any utilities, any commands that they use. We can now look at this to resolve our issues and get the information that we need for auditing purposes. So once again, this is a solution overview where we have two sections here. You notice that we have a green section that is pertaining to the database auditing, and the blue side is talking about the data retrieval side of auditing. So let's take a real high level look at this process. For the database auditing in the green, there is an administrator that configures the database server, Audit Server, by using the database manager, which is the graphical user interface for administration of the database. And we'll take another look at it. In this particular product now, there is a function for auditing specifically. So this is where the administrator will define and create the information and the metadata about the database audit server. So the process is like this. Your application doesn't change. There's nothing that you change in your application. So your regular applications will access database, and those applications again could be natural, COBOL, PL1, it doesn't matter. Whatever makes an event or a process to database, then that information will be transferred to the audit server and then stored in a log data set. So what we're going to do, we're going to take a look at a deeper dive of this part of the function of auditing. So once again, you have the administrator, and an administrator is the person that configures this project. And now we have an audit server. And if you look at some of the terminology you see, like subscriptions, destination, filters, metadata, it kind of reminds you a little bit of our replication solution. But this is different. Replication only sends you the update. With database auditing, we send more than the update. We send the before and after image of the data. We send the information in the control block. So everything you need to know for auditing purposes will be captured in this database audit server. So let's take a look at what we configure here in the database manager auditing function for auditing. You have a subscription, and this subscription, this is where you gather all of your files and you deem them as being auditable. So when an event happens to database, it will check this audit server to see if that file is deemed to be auditable. In this, we'll know the database ID, the file number, the command settings that you want to look for, the buffers. We have information about filters, and in these filters, this is where you set your rules. What I want to be a part of that record. Do I want to exclude data or include the record data? I also have the metadata of the data, of the fields, the attributes, everything about what is a part of that file. And then, of course, there's the destination, and the destination says, where am I sending this data to? So you can send it to the audit, or you can set it for a prototype to make sure that this is what you want to be audited, and you will do a pre-screening with your stakeholders that are looking to do the auditing of specific data. And then from that point, once you have captured data, it is then sent to an audit log, which is a sequential data set. And just like P logs, you can have dual audit logs. So when data is being written to the audit log, this can be an automated process that once it gets full, when you set that parameter, this can then switch to a different log, and then that data will be copied off and be ready to be obtained and exported to the Adabas data retrieval system. So let's take a look at on the blue side, which is the Adabas Audit data retrieval system. On this system here, on this side, this is where the administrator for this part will set up all the information that it's going to receive from the green side, from the Adabas Audit side. So this is where it takes all the data, and we're going to take a look at in detail what the Adabas data retrieval system and what it gathers. So once those audit logs have been created, the Adabas audit data retrieval function will import those AdaLog data sets, those sequential data sets, and will import those into the Adabas data retrieval system. And from that point, it will process and it will build the indexes for the primary keys and other descriptors. It will then lay out the data structures of the elements, such as the formats and lengths of those fields. So all that information that was captured in that subscription will be gathered into and used within the Adabas retrieval system. It will logically group all of the subscriptions so that if you want to look at transactions across related files, all this information is captured. And also it will capture that client information. That's the who, what, when, and where. So it have all that information captured within the system. And of course, the requests. What were the commands? What was the ISN? What was the file number? What was the command ID? All that information is then stored within the Adabas retrieval system in that retrieval database. And then at the bottom, there's your auditor. And you will use a tool that will allow them to, it's a search engine. So it will search that the retrieval system and that database based on those indices that you have defined, and allow them to obtain the data that they need. And again, this portion here should only be given to privileged users to look at this data. And at any time, you can set a retention period, how long you want to keep this data out there. Remember, this is not an archiving system. This is an audit system. So you should only put out there and extract only the data that is necessary, not the entire record, but based on what the auditors are looking for, that's what you should set up within the data retrieval system. So let's take a look at a couple of case studies here. And then I'm going to do a demo of this, a live demo of this as well. In the first case, use case, it's an unauthorized report. An auditor found a report that was downloaded to an unauthorized network server. And in this report, he noticed that this report was about employees who made a salary greater than $80,000. And this piqued his interest. So first of all, why was this on this server, and who actually did this report, and what was the purpose of this? So you need to find out who did this record and where did they access this information from. And our second use case, and I'm going to demo, is a security officer was very suspicious, and he noticed that an employee that was driving a very expensive car, he noticed him in the parking lot. And you know, this employee worked as an operator, and his salary just did not qualify him to drive such an expensive car. So after researching this employee's record, they noticed that this employee's record had been updated on a regular basis just before each payroll ended, and then changed back once the process was done. So now they need to figure out who was updating this employee record. So from this point, let's get started with a demo. Here we're looking at the audit data viewer. As a privileged user, I have access to this GUI application. Here I will put in my user ID credentials. That gives me access to this data. And now I have entered into the data viewer system. Now if you notice on the left hand side of the screen, you see a lot of different options here. This is the layout that is developed and created for each auditor based on what their needs of what they want to see in an audit report. So I'm in this particular group here, and in this folder these are all of my required querying reports that I ask for as an auditor. So let's look at the first one here, whereas I wanted to look at who created this report out on the system, and I want to know what they were looking at. What did they do anything with this data? Why? And who did it? That's the main point. So here are my search criteria and my indexes that I've set up and defined within the system. So in this way, I'm just gonna, I don't know who they were looking for. I want to see all commands, and I want to get a list of everyone that did that. So by using the wildcard, that's everything. If I knew something specific, I can put in that information and only hone in on that specific information for my search. So I start my search process. Now, this gave me a high-level search criteria, some other information. So these are all the different audit files that have been added out to the retrieval system. But I want to look at something recent here, which is in this one here. So I will select this particular file, and I can refine my search even further. In this case, I can look at things like I want to see who the records were, the names, an individual, and I still want to look at the command ID and the actual user who was looking at these records. So when I select that, this will give me another list, and now this was able to give me some information, and this is the information that there were 275 records that was a part of that search, and it tells me that this individual here, this user here, actually looked at this data, DEEC. And so looking at the information, this is some of the information that is gathered. It was a read. This is the user ID and the audit ID, and this was the description. It read by ISN order. This is again the user. This is the file number, and this was the subscription that I used to capture this information. And this is the date that that individual actually created and looked at that particular record. And this was the time that it was processed. We can also look at further client information. In this client information, it tells me information about, again, it read the record, who the person was, but then if I go further down to the data, it gives me some other information. It tells me that this was batch, the job ID, the account information, the LPAR that the individual was on, the actual sub-program that actually gathered the data, again the user ID, and in the user ID that he logged into the system, as well as this was the name of the application, and then this was the actual program that called this sub-program, and the natural security user ID of that individual. And this was the library, again, the application name and the library name of where this data resided. If I want to look at some of the data, this is the data, the actual record that the individual looked at. And so this was record number 1, if you see at the top here, out of 275. And it was this this individual here, Simone Adams. And going down, this is all of the information. And you look here, her salary, she makes $175,000. So we can look for this for all the other records. all the data for the other person, their salary here, $100,000. Look at all the bonuses that the individual. So you just continue to go in through and see exactly why he was looking at this, and this was the purpose. He wanted to see what salaries individuals, for what reason we don't know. We have to now find this individual and ask why did he create this particular report. All right, let's look at another report here. Let's look at the other option, suspicious bonus. So again, we have that individual that that drove this expensive car, and we need to figure out how could he afford this particular car. So in this case, we'll look at command ID. We want to see anything that's been changed, and I want to know who made changes to a file. So I'm going to do a user ID again of an asterisk, and I'm going to issue a search for that. And once again, I choose that option and refine it. And then I want to look for this code again, A1, which is alter. And then this particular user ID, select it again. And he's searching, and this is the result. And again, this is user, DEEC. This user was the one, and the commands was all altered. So if I look at this record, let's say record 4, I'm selecting record 4. You notice that in this information, again, it tells me the ISN of the record, what type of process they did. It did an update to the record. In the whole option, again, this was the date that it was done and the time, 1806. This was the time that it was processed. Let's look at the data. Here's the before image. So we look at this particular individual and we scroll down to the salary, and we see that this individual had this particular salary. And then we look at the after data, and in the after data, this particular, now this bonus, he got another bonus. He got a bonus of $5,000. Let's go to the before. There was no bonus. In the after, there is a bonus. Wow, what a bonus, right? And what kind of car does he drive? And let's look at the next record. Again, this is the same individual. And if we look at the before data, this is the data that he changed. And then the after image of the same data, he put his bonus back to 0. So we need to figure out the correlation between this user and the this employee that's been changed, data has been changed. Something tells me they know each other. So that's a quick look of how you can use the data, and you can come up with all types of scenarios of looking for data and looking at the information that has been changed, updated, added, and or deleted. Once again, our summary. Adabas Auditing allows you to track all database operations, is able to handle high volume of data. Should be used for only privileged users, because this data is secured. You're allowed to create ad hoc queries and view the reports, as well as create reports. So that data could be downloaded to a spreadsheet just in case you needed to take that information into court for some type of processing. And then once again, you can define your retention period for your requirements, how long you want to keep the data. Thank you for watching the video, and enjoy the rest of your day.